there's a huge gap between healthspan and lifespan. Science has managed to keep us alive longer, but quality of life hasn't been built into that. So now we have the tools to be able to do something about that and try and close the gap.
Now, could you hack your way to a longer and healthier life? Perhaps wearables, artificial intelligence, gene editing, robotic assistance are just some of the solutions that are already giving us important insights into our health. And the technology is only getting more and more sophisticated. Over the course of her career as a broadcaster and tech journalist, Lara Lewington has put herself forward as an enthusiastic guinea pig for lots of healthy technology, and she's written a brilliant new book about everything she's learned. It's called Hacking Humanity, and I'm delighted to say that Lara's in the studio with me now. Hello.
Hello, it's great to be here and always happy to be a guinea pig.
Yeah, and look, we've been talking about this over the years. You've been a regular friend to the show. This is the first time we've met in person.
I know, this feels quite incredible. I think because
we've been talking for 5 years.
I know, and because we started during COVID, it became the norm that we did it remotely. So today I seized the opportunity. It's lovely to meet you.
Yes, good to meet you too. Now look, I know, and you've been covering it and you've been telling us about all the health tech that's been around, and you have been sort of trying it. You've met Brian Johnson several times, the man who's actually sort of, can we say that he's at the forefront of trying to hack his health and
I
his
think that's
longevity?
fair. I was actually the first person to interview him, and of course his career has spiralled in the time since. I'm not holding myself responsible for this. But yeah, he's been testing everything, trying to reverse his biological age. But what I'm looking at here in the book is way less extreme than that. Yeah. Yes, we have a few pages on Brian, but actually right now in England, a high-income country where we have the National Health Service, women are spending 25% of their lives in poor health, men 20%. So what this means is there's a huge gap between healthspan and lifespan. Science has managed to keep us alive longer, but quality of life hasn't been built into that. So now we have the tools to be able to do something about that and try and close the gap.
So talk to me about some of the tools that you cover in the book.
Sure. So I guess there's two sides to it, really. You've got what we can do to help ourselves, and you've also got what this means for healthcare systems. And I really just want to try and explain to people how this works, what AI is doing in the background. I mean, it's not a book that goes into AI and technology in great detail. It's a really human story with people's stories there and about what all of this means for us. AI and technology are the drivers here. And for our own health, what we can do for ourselves, well, we know the importance of sleep, diet and exercise. I'm not stating the obvious, but technology gives us the chance to be able to quantify that, to make changes in our lives or do tests and see what a difference that can make because we can quantify the results.
I remember you and I talking about sleep aids and sleep monitors.
Yeah, there's so many.
There are so many. You love them, don't you?
Well, I kind of have mixed feelings, actually, because I do love tracking my sleep. I'm not an insomniac. I will sleep for whatever time I have in my schedule. I'm very lucky. But I find it really useful to have a pattern of that sleep data to look back on. And I think for most people, my view is that the long-term data, those patterns and any changes in those patterns are way more important than how many steps you did yesterday. Yeah. But some of the sleep devices that are meant to help insomniacs, things you're meant to wear to bed, when I was testing them, I was sleeping worse than ever because I was so conscious of having to be aware of how they felt, were they staying on. But actually regular wearables, I think, are useful. Not everyone feels this way. Some people, well, they may just make them feel more anxious. They'll worry more about the sleep they're not getting. But there's a lot that we can glean from the data from these wearables long term. Research is just starting to show, for example, that the changes in sleep pattern that happen at the very, very early stages of someone having dementia, so we're talking 20 to 30 years before symptoms, could potentially be picked up by a wearable. And it's really early days for this kind of stuff. They're not medical devices. They may have some medical elements, but long term, we are heading in a direction where we're going to be able to learn so much more by the pure fact that we can track ourselves all the time.
I want to come back to wearables in just a moment. What are some of the most extreme bits of tech that you've tested and that you've written about in the book?
Well, you can have your genome sequenced for a few £100 now. Now, 2 decades ago, it cost $3 billion to sequence the first person's genome.
Gosh.
Now, you can see how far that's come. The question is, how useful is it now for most of us to do? Well, Genomics England are doing some really interesting and powerful research. They've been testing the genome of newborns who are at high risk of rare disease. Now, rare diseases are actually fairly common. 1 in 17 people has one. And with some of these rare diseases they're looking at, if untreated, a child could go blind, for example. So being able to find those problems early enough are really important. So there are times when genome sequencing is really important. Now, as we move forward in this journey of future health, sequencing genome will become more and more important as more becomes actionable and as we understand more about the genome, and also as we start to understand more about the impact of medicines on different people, on different genetics. Yeah. So all of this will come together more in the future. But right now, a lot of this testing could just make you panic. I was told I had a 43% chance of a heart attack.
Really?
Yes, but we also have to understand...
You're one of the most fit people I know.
I try, but I think part of this picture of future health actually is what we take from the data we collect. Now, it doesn't mean I have a 43% chance of a heart attack sitting here right now.
Yeah.
It's genetically a 43% chance of a heart attack at some point in my life, but that's expecting a long life expectancy. But actually, I live a really healthy lifestyle, so I'm reducing my risk. There's a lot of risk reduction that you can do within this. So I'm not panicking about that stat, but I appreciate some people could.
I mean, the interpretation of some of that data is key, and perhaps that's one area that we're lagging behind. But let me ask you this, because when we're talking about wearables, I saw a clip of the US Health Secretary, RFK Jr., and he was saying that he would like to see every American with a wearable in the foreseeable future. Now, for a lot of people, that will come as quite an alarmist statement, perhaps a little bit dystopian, that the government wants you to wear a wearable. But let's put that aside. Are you concerned? You know where I'm going with this, because you and I have talked about this before. Are you concerned by the amount of data? And particularly, this is really personal data. It's about you. It's about your body. It's about your health. Falling into the hands of wearables manufacturers, private companies who are going to be collecting and harvesting that data.
It's really interesting how differently people feel depending on where their data is going and who is going to gain from it. So there was a survey that showed how happy people were, well, still not entirely happy, about giving the NHS their data, but how they felt about it being sent to tech companies. Because it's not just a matter of them being worried about how the data's looked after, but it's also who is benefiting from it. Most data that we are talking about here, that we are learning from, and the sort of data from wearables is anonymised. So it's not like your personal information. But obviously there are sensitivities around places where you can't have abortions, period tracking. There are lots of things that could be introduced here into the worries that could plausibly happen. But generally, the idea of tracking most of this data isn't going to have any real impact on any individual's life. But of course, it's unlikely to. But of course, people may still have sensitivity surrounding it. The other side to this is, especially this week, we've been talking about the government 10-year health plan and being able to do more within the NHS app. And obviously, if we're going to centralise our own medical data and medical records, we are moving into the realms of your own personal data. That's not about anonymised data in the same way. But wherever healthcare data is being used, there is privacy and safety at the core of these systems. I'm not saying things never go wrong.
And at times, things that you're not in control over. So, for example, all those people who did DNA tests, those little swab tests to find out genealogy websites, basically. 23andMe is what I'm talking about. Now, they were hacked. 7 million people's had their details hacked. But also, more importantly, set that aside, they have now... I don't know if the technical term would be they've gone bankrupt, but essentially they might be owned by a different company.
Yeah,
so you don't know where your data, specifically your DNA data, is going to end up.
It was actually third-party hacks where passwords had been reused.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. So it was the other websites where people have been recycling the passwords.
But essentially what I'm getting at is you never know where your data is going to end up.
No, that's so true. And Yes, look, you put your data out there, of course there's risk.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say there's no risk. And of course, when it comes to DNA data, it's not like your credit card or your bank details. You can't just go and change it. Now, we all need to make a conscious decision as to what service we're getting back in return and how much we feel it's worth it. I think people have often felt very angry about the money social media companies make, but they are also using the service at the same time. And there's a balance and there's a trade-off. And if you think about it, is your data the price for using the service? Now, you're paying to give your DNA to many of these companies, but also for many users, they feel like they appreciate the benefit. For some people, it's not for them. They wouldn't feel comfortable handing over their DNA. They wouldn't feel comfortable handing that over. I'm pretty free with my DNA, which sort of sounds ludicrous, because I'm happy to carry out all of these tests and I want to see what's available and how they work, and I'm not particularly worried about that. But of course, I appreciate the sensitivities that there are, and also in different parts of the world, and we don't know how the future plays out, and we don't know what data issues there could be in time to come.
It's a fascinating book because it really shows you how much we've come along, even in the last 5 years, let alone decades, of the leaps and bounds that tech, including wearables, AI, all of that stuff, has done. I remember being at a conference about 10, 12 years ago, and there was a futurist there.
I love futurists.
Yes. They have a really good job, and they're able to say, well, this is going to happen, but no one's going to be able to hold them to account
This is true.
if it doesn't. But he was saying that, for example, toilets will come equipped with chips. So every time you use them, they will take an analysis and send it to your doctor if there is an issue. Are we going to be seeing things like that actually come to fruition? That doesn't exist just yet, or maybe it does. I don't know.
Well, there are devices that you can put down the toilet. Do you remember in the 1980s, you'd have those bright coloured, they were sort of bleach or something down the toilet. You flush,
so every time
a
you
chain,
flush
it would go
it,
blue. Yeah. So they kind of look like that, these devices that I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show in January in Las Vegas. Down a toilet to test for urine infections and anything else in your urine that's not right in the morning. Because a lot of people believe that the idea is it's seamless tracking. It's not noticing we're constantly being tracked all the time.
Yeah.
So if you had that in your home, if you had sensors that, I don't know, absolutely everything you could do. You could be tracking, my book actually opens on this idea of a future where everything's being tracked and the world is perfected around you. I mean, how much of this we want is a question.
That is a different question, isn't it? But as you say in the book, and as it's blindingly obvious, knowledge is power. The more we know, the more we can analyse. The more we can actually help eradicate disease and get people to live a nice, long, comfortable life.
Yeah, it's about understanding risk. And you can pull together all of these factors, and AI allows us to digest that data in ways we never could, to really understand risk, to be able to predict and therefore potentially prevent.
Well, it's great to meet in person.
Oh, and you.
The book is called Hacking Humanity. When does it actually come out?
Thursday. Available for pre-order now.
Available for pre-order now. How technology can save your health and your life. Lara Lewington, thank you. Until next time.
Thank you so much.
The book is out on Thursday, available to pre-order.